24 miles north of Independence Hall in Philadelphia, nestled in the rolling foothills of south-central Bucks County, sits historic Warwick Township. Founded in 1733, Warwick's fertile fields and sacred settings look much as they did when Scotch-Irish settlers first arrived here over 260 years ago. Vintage farmhouses, many over 2 centuries old, speak of a quieter, simpler time. The main thoroughfare through town is Old York Road, at one time the principal overland link between American colonists living in New York and Philadelphia. The Neshaminy and Little Neshaminy Creeks drain the countryside toward the Delaware, as they have for centuries. Glimpses of yesterday are all around. But no 2-century-old dwelling, no scenic country corridor, no parcel of hallowed ground is more significant to our national heritage than the home of John and Catherine Moland. Built around 1750, the Moland house was not like the log cabins with lofts that dotted rural Bucks County in the mid-18th century. In the 1903 publication, The History of Bucks County, W.W.H. Davis described the Moland house as a substantial stone dwelling in good preservation. Historian William T. Buck claimed that at the time of the American Revolution, the Moland house was the best finished house in the neighborhood. On a hot summer evening in 1777, the Continental Army of the United States marched along Old York Road, ultimately arriving at the crossroads in the Hartsville section of Warwick Township, just south of the Moland house. That evening, General George Washington made this substantial stone dwelling, this best finished house in the neighborhood, his residence and military headquarters during his historic 13-day Neshaminy encampment. The Warwick Township Historical Society sponsors an annual celebration of the Neshaminy encampment, a living testament to the courage of America's first fighting force.
Present your arms. 1, 2, fix your bayonet. Right wheel. March.
Tragically, that substantial stone dwelling that George Washington occupied, arguably the single most important historic structure in all of Bucks County, has not fared quite so well.
Watch your step. Okay. Oh boy. Roof's coming in again.
Thank God, it gets worse and worse all the time, doesn't it?
Oop. Watch out for the glass. Yeah, okay. Hey, family circle. Hasn't been a family in here for ages. God, what a mess. What a mess. Hey, you guys, look at this.
Condemned. That says it all, doesn't it?
Boy, it sure does.
Everywhere you look at a Moland house, you find evidence of long-term neglect. Behind me here, you find a wall built in the 1750s. The plaster wall on top of it was built in the 1940s. And that's just not making it. And that's really the story of the Moland house. The garbage, beer cans, flowers. Oh, wow, look at this chair. Hey guys, want a seat? It's a real tragedy that a house with this much history has fallen in such a state of disrepair.
Most of that decay has been in the last 10 or 15 years, starting with the previous tenants. The final tenants, that is. The decay really accelerated after the last tenants moved out.
And that's when the vandalism started. Time after time they've tried to secure this building, both the township and the historical commission. But they continue to find ways of getting in, and the evidence is obvious.
Wow. That's a pentagram. Upside down, 5-pointed star. Typically associated with devil worship, satanic rituals. Look at this. Here's a swastika. Here's an upside down cross, 666. There's the pentagram again. Oh, here we have Satan lives, God is dead. It's really nice to be a neighbor living right up the street from this.
But it's not just the vandalism. Every time the kids break into this house, they're in great danger. So who do we blame? Well, of course you have to blame the vandals, but we also have to blame the people who allowed the situation to get this way.
Many old homes in Bucks County have been restored and treasured, and it's hard to believe that a house this important has been ignored.
I think that it's still not too late to save the house.
Legal issues and exorbitant costs stand in the way of any real Moland House restoration plans.
History books considered a shrine.
The irreplaceable Moland House has been embroiled in a legal maze for over a decade. It all originally started when the validity of the will of the prior owner was tested in court and has continued down until this date, whereupon it has now been sold at a sheriff's sale to pay off debts. The Warwick Township Historical Commission has already proceeded and recommended to the Warwick Township Board of Supervisors to acquire the property before it is lost forever.
Less than a stone's throw away, the echoes of history can still be heard.
There are 277 acres of land surrounding this creek.
The Warwick Historic Commission would love to see this ground preserved, either for a national park or a national cemetery.
And at the very least, the Moland House must be preserved.
George Washington really did sleep here. Indeed, necessity forced the beleaguered general to sleep all over colonial America. So, why all this concern over a dilapidated old dwelling he left only to suffer 2 decisive defeats? Perhaps because a council of war held in this home on August 21st, 1777, included the following persons: George Washington, founding father and first president of the United States; Washington's aide-de-camp, Alexander Hamilton, co-author of the Federalist Papers and the first secretary of the U.S. Treasury; Captain Lighthorse Harry Lee, whose father and uncle signed the Declaration of Independence; a future governor of Virginia, and the father of a future West Point grad named Robert E. Lee, who made his indelible mark on American history in another era. Captain Thomas Paine, author of Common Sense and the Rights of Man, who penned the immortal revolutionary maxim, "These are the times that try men's souls." Lieutenant John Marshall, the first Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court. Captain James Monroe, the 5th President of the United States. It was in this house that the Polish general Kazimierz Pulaski, who later saved Washington's life at the Battle of Brandywine, presented his officer's commission to the American commander-in-chief. And it was in this house that a wealthy young French nobleman named Marquis de Lafayette had what his memoirs described as a great conversation with General Washington, forging a friendship that would last the rest of their lives. Following that meeting, the 19-year-old Frenchman received his command, and over the next 7 years, Lafayette rode by Washington's side and spent over $3 million of his personal fortune, the equivalent of roughly $85 million today, to help America gain its independence. On June 14, 1777, the Continental Congress authorized the design for the first American flag, a Philadelphia seamstress, is credited with its creation. That flag, known to every American schoolchild as the Betsy Ross flag, is said to have flown over American troops for the very first time right here at the Moland House.
One of the most significant events of the American Revolution was Lafayette's joining the American cause for independence.
That event took place in this once substantial stone dwelling right here behind us.
Now it's time for those who care about this nation's historic heritage to respond to another crucial cause.
Those who gathered here in this house to ensure that future generations of Americans could enjoy life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness left behind a lasting legacy.
But if we don't act soon, that legacy will lose a significant location, one that's listed in the National Register of Historic Places.
Please, join with us. Help us save this very important address in American history. Contact your local, state, and federal elected officials. Express your concern. Voice your support for the preservation of this historic landmark and national treasure before it's too late.
Since the first part of this story was produced 16 years ago, there have been many changes to Warwick Township, including a threefold increase in our population. But the greatest change, the most miraculous transformation that many despaired of ever seeing, has been to the Moland House. Before we pay a visit, to fully appreciate the Moland House today, you will want to know the story of how it was saved. After decades of feuding and frustration, when the Moland House was close to being bulldozed to make way for modern housing, the Warwick supervisors finally reached an agreement with the developer who had recently purchased the property. That turned out to be the easy part. The township was not prepared to go into the business of transforming an abandoned shell of a house into a national treasure. A few years earlier, some concerned neighbors had formed the Warwick Township Historical Society, a nonprofit group whose major priority was saving the Moland House. The society now took on an enormous responsibility. They signed an agreement with the township to preserve, plan, restore, and refurbish the house and surrounding grounds, and to run programs for the benefit of the public.
Honored guests and friends, welcome to the Moland House. You may fire!
All well and good, but without substantial seed money, we lacked the credibility to attract the major donors who would be indispensable for getting this immense project off the ground. Every story of a miracle needs the intervention of angels. Ours took the form of Ken and Helen Gemmel. It was the Gemmels, Warwick's first family, who donated the matching funds required for a grant offered by the Pennsylvania Historic and Museum Commission. It would be one of the last of their many generous acts. We got the grant. We now had $200,000, and we were on our way. And how, you may ask, do you go about restoring a house built 250 years ago, with all the changes made by 14 different owners, and finally ruined and vandalized beyond recognition? How could we possibly determine what the house looked like in 1777, when Washington's aide politely asked the widow Moland to vacate for a while? Here's how. You simply work up the nerve to ask the most respected architectural firm in the nation, specializing in 18th century restoration, if they would consider your project. And John Milner Architects agreed to take the job. John Milner and his partner Mary Denadi knew exactly how to uncover the evidence of the original appearance of the house and to bring it back to life. Let's listen in as Mary Denadi explains their proposals for restoring the house to members of the society. At this point, the house had been mostly gutted of features added since the time of the Moland family.
The joists are going to be running north to south. These joists were put in by the Graves when they made this into one big room. And we have all the joist pockets in the stone wall to indicate where those locations are.
Do you think they used some of the original joists here and turned them? Are these 1950 vintage
These are the 40s.
Pieces of lumber, 40s?
Yeah, and they are not
original.
No, because these are much longer than any other joist would have been in this space, and they would have removed all of those.
Volunteer members had filled huge dumpsters of trash that had been left on the historic property, and we enthusiastically removed layers of plasters and rotted board to expose the original evidence for the architects. But the time came when our amateur volunteers had done as much as they could. We needed a master carpenter to start the actual reconstruction. Again, we hired the best. Bill Merrick of Bucks County was recognized as an expert in 18th century woodworking. He turned out to be the perfect choice. Using the tools and techniques of John Moland's time, Bill replaced nearly every joist and floorboard in the house and remade most of the windows. For Bill Merrick, this has been a labor of love that has lasted over 10 years. In the 250-year-old stone farmhouse, not only the woodwork had been destroyed, much of the original stonework around the doors and windows and the original fireplaces were greatly changed. Here again, Providence smiled on us. Steve Snyder of Point Pleasant in Bucks County can look at a stone that has been moved and by its cut and shape tell its original location in the wall, and if the original was missing, he cut an exact duplicate. All of this took a lot of money, but every time the purse was getting thin, it seemed that we managed to get a new donation from friends who believed in our cause as much as we did. Sometimes a grant was enormous, like the $275,000 from Save America's Treasures. Sometimes it was a few hundred from patriotic societies. Perhaps the one that meant the most to us was one of the smallest. As the grounds became more inviting, we started to stage an annual reenactment for our growing audience, featuring the 5th Pennsylvania Regiment in full uniform. The event has become a favorite of adults and children alike.
Hear ye all! The next tour of the Moland House will be at 12 o'clock. We will assemble on the north porch.
Now that the house has been restored, we are slowly filling it with period antiques and expert reproductions. The Moland House is once more the best finished house in the neighborhood. So now you know what happened here and what it looks like today. You know who did it and how it happened. As for the why hundreds of volunteers dedicated thousands of hours to save the home of John Moland. This is the best answer we can give. Each year, along with hundreds of other visitors, the story of the Moland House is told to 5th grade classes from schools all around the area. One of these schools even sends its students back in homemade colonial costumes to reenact what they learned in class and on their first visit.
Thank you for saving the Moland House. Thank you for saving the Moland House.
Thank you for saving the Moland House.
Thank you for saving the Moland House. Thank you for saving the Moland House.
Thank you for saving the Moland House.
Thank you for saving the Moland House. Thank you for saving the Moland House.
Thank you for saving the Moland House.
Thank you for saving the Moland House. We really appreciate it. Thank you for saving the Moland House. Thank you for saving the Moland House.
Preset your Phyllox.